First Minister and the Henchwoman, Sturgeon, they've got no clothes. The question isn't that it's been put in the country, isn't about breaking up the union. That is in fact all we're going to get. The question that's been put is, should Scotland be an independent country? Independence is not on the table. When Sturgeon has said she's not going to give us a vote in the EU, when we're going to keep the monarch based in England, London, when we want to go into Sterling. So why will your campaign more focus on that obvious point? I think you would win over more yes voters.
Okay. I think there's a couple of things to say about that. Firstly, you're not alone. Just remember the length of this campaign. 2.5 years is the longest campaign in political history. I think even the Americans don't take this long to elect a president. So there's something about pacing. But you're right. Something like 30% of people who voted SNP in the last election year. Correct me on these figures if you know otherwise. But I think around about 30% or 35% of people who voted for the SNP at the last election don't support independence. Now, they don't support it for a variety of reasons, or they may have voted SNP for a variety of reasons. I thought other parties were rubbish and the SNP was a good choice at that point. But what you're saying about independence not being on the table is exactly right, because if you think about what Alex Salmond is saying, he's talking about a currency union. Now, this sounds really boring and technical, but it goes to absolutely the heart of everything this debate talks about. Now, he says, or he asserts, that somehow we will vote to leave the UK, but the rest of the UK will say, well, that's fine, we will change our entire sovereign arrangement and enter into a currency union with a foreign country. Now, it's absolutely no guarantee that happened. The Shadow Chancellor said no, the First Minister of Wales has said no, but Alex Salmond asserts otherwise because only he knows and very much more. Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, the Euros is popular in Dunoon as it is in Derby. But what he's saying is that the currency union, if he was to go down this route, control over Scotland's economy would be ceded to Westminster. Now that's not independence. I mean, it's serfdom actually. It's saying here as a foreign country who you just vote to leave, you can have the powers over our mortgages, over our savings rates, over all these different things. Why on earth would you vote for that? And why would you even propose it? I think the simple fact is, he doesn't believe it. Focus groups told him that you better find somebody of the sake of Scottish people who are going to keep the pound, because people quite like the pound, and if you're going to lose it, then that'll be a real vote loser. So yeah, I accept that maybe your motivation for voting no might not be common across a lot of people, but you are not alone.
Just in reference to the last question there, I'm very glad you're going to vote no. There was a great many people who we canvassed at a by-election up in the northeast, which is Mr. Salmond's home ground. I should think a great number of people, I don't know what percentage it was, but when we canvassed, would tell us that, they were happy to vote SNP, or they were happy last time, that there was a bridge too far to go for separation. And again we heard this argument. We were really confident about it, to tell you the truth. We were very pleased. Now the other thing was that on the currency issue, for example, Mr. Canavan, who's after the head of the US campaign, wants a separate Scottish currency. He hasn't said what it's going to be called yet. Might be called a groat, might be called, I'm not sure what it is. But anyhow, he wants that. Whereas Mr. Salmond wants to keep the pound. There's no detail at all about what's going to happen to Europe. There's no detail on defence. I won't go on that, we haven't asked those questions, but you're quite right. It's all cloud cuckoo land in many ways, quite honestly.
I find this completely shocking, right? I ask everybody, yes voter, no voter, whatever, to define for me the meaning of their definition of the word independence, without using Scotland, England, EU, Westminster, all that. I started a Twitter hashtag IndieDef. Only one person gave me a proper definition, and that was a unionist. SNP, brainwash, yes voters, just ignored the question, hedged the question, whatever. Yeah. But this is the question that's been put to us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to have a great education system, and the people of this country don't know the meaning of the word independence.
Well, the funny thing is, because one was a conservative principle, dare I say, to stand on your own 2 feet and be independent. But it's a true meaning of the word, not separatist meaning, you know, the sort of greedy sort of feeling, oh, we've got a little bit of oil from it, so let's, you know, use it just for ourselves, instead of for a broader base to help each other. And you know, anyone who's going to base their economy on one single factor like oil has got a rude shock coming to them in the near future.
The key point, you want to say something?
Yes, it's a very good question that gets right to the heart of the referendum, and what exactly is independence. And I think that the key thing to remember here is that the SNP were formed in the 1930s, when that was then the stage of the classic nation state, completely independent, having very little interaction with the neighbours. Now, the world in the 80 years since the 1930s has moved on, but the SNP are still stuck in that 1930s view of a nation state, which just isn't relevant today. It's a very good question, which I think is irrelevant to the modern world, because I think it's irrelevant to the modern world, because all countries we're all interdependent. Yes, we're all interdependent in the modern world. I mean, the currency question gets to the heart of what would a supposedly independent Scotland actually use as a currency. I mean, the SNP's proposal is that we use the pound, but obviously that requires the agreement of the United Kingdom. And also, if we use the pound as a foreign country's currency, we're giving up a lot of important economic levers. The right to set your interest rates, the right to set borrowing limits. So that just begs the question, what is the point of, I guess, votes when all these important economic levers were handed over to a foreign country, whereas at the moment we are part of that country and we share the decisions on these important economic levers. I mean, there are actually 4 possible options for the currency. There's the pound, which we just described the pitfalls with. There's joining the euro, which I don't think is attractive to anybody these days. There's setting up our own currency, but that is a mammoth job. And the problem with setting up your own currency is, just as if you go to try to borrow money and you've no track record of borrowing money, you find it very difficult to get loans and you get charged very high interest rates. Scotland will inherit a massive national debt from the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom, because it has a track record of never defaulting on its debts, has low interest rates. Scotland, using its own currency with no track record, just like a young person going to get a mortgage, would suddenly find very high interest rates on this very high level of debt. The final option is what's known as the Montenegro solution. That's not to have any currency at all, but just use other people's currencies without any agreements. That's a disaster, because for a sophisticated economy, you simply cannot borrow money. So none of the 4 options are attractive, and the question is, what problem are we trying to solve when at the moment we're part of a strong United Kingdom with a stable currency, low interest rates? I'm not quite sure what the benefits that the SNP see for tearing up the present arrangements.
David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when Czechoslovakia broke up, the Czechs and the Slovaks had a currency union that lasted 30 days. So, what you can learn from that. And as everyone knows, history repeats itself, so what you can say about that. And I think to answer your question is, Immanuel Kant said that freedom or independence means to be autonomous, so that's to make your own decisions. And fundamentally, with what's being proposed, that wouldn't be the case.
Because I think it's absolutely essential that we get all the facts out there and we make sure that 100% are out for the actual referendum, because it's the biggest event in Scottish history, and we've got to make sure that we get the proper facts out there. regard to his vision for the future. And of course, if you look at certain aspects of what the Scottish Government does have control of, education, you won't be paying tuition fees in an independent Scotland as you're not paying at this point in time. Our health service is operating on different basis. I just wanted to put a question to Mr. McGregor with regard to the veteran tax. The 800 families within Argyll and Bute who are affected by this, do you still think we're better together? Because it's not what the people of Scotland want for the vulnerable in our society. And that's just one aspect of it. But I'm delighted to have dialogue and debate and discussion. Absolutely essential.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go into what in fact is referred to as the spare room subsidy, which is in fact originally an attempt to bring the private sector into line with the public housing. That's what it's for, if you look into it. I think the point of your question is to try and somehow divide us, and we're better together.
I'm just asking, there were 800 families in Argyll and Bute.
Yes, with me.
The Tory led government in Westminster have put that piece of legislation in place which will affect 800 families in Argyll and Bute. I just have a worry that really the divide, if you like, between what Westminster think is good for us as a society naturally differs from what we in Scotland.
It's in every other constituency. I'm afraid it's not just Argyll and Bute, it's every other constituency in the land.
I'm a local representative for folk in Argyll.
Well, so am I.
Yeah, and there's 800 families.
I've been to see. I've been. Build it.
I think, hold on.
If we're independent here, then that piece of legislation will not have been passed. It's been passed by Westminster, and it will be rescinded by an independent Scotland.
Well, you made another point. Can I just say, you made another point about tuition fees. I mean, if you're English and you come here, you have to pay tuition fees. You have to. Nobody else does, but the English have to pay. You think that's fair?
Can I just make a comment really? What you're trying to do is pick specific policies and then hang them on the Constitution. We're actually not being asked to vote on the veteran tax. We're not being asked to vote on tuition fees. And there's another piece of information that I think is really, really important. In 2010, there was a 63% turnout at the general election. A year later, there was a 50% turnout at the Scottish election. Do you know that more people voted Tory and Lib Dem in 2010 than voted SNP 1 year later? So to say that, it's not my policy, but I know that I don't get it all my own way all the time, to say that the policies of the coalition have no support in Scotland is actually therefore to say that there's even less support for SNP policies at Holyrood because fewer people voted for them than voted for the coalition parties. But fundamentally, you can't then start hanging the policies that you want on a debate that, as the lady said, is about independence. It's about that autonomy and that carrying away. You can't pretend that in an independent Scotland, 100% of the people will get 100% of the policies they want 100% of the time. That's the way you're trying to drive it, and that's not how it works.
So, I want to clarify that. What we're saying was, once we have an independent Scotland, that is what the will of the people, if that's the will of the people. If it's not the will of the people, what will be the alternative? And from a Westminster perspective, we're not necessarily hearing of devolution plus. So that's still a worry that folk have to know. Many people are quite happy to go along with the presidency state of affairs, but they know that after the 18th of September, we want to know what else is Scotland.
Well, we almost to Salmon wants to have a fallback position, which is what he wanted when he wanted two questions. I mean, why can't we just have one question, get it over with, see how the people vote, and then get on with running the country, whoever's in charge. And the thing about it, I mean, last week in the Parliament we had a debate on the Common Agricultural Policy, and I was absolutely sickened by your party's insistence on talking about the referendum throughout, and when Scottish farmers are looking for a decent deal, and I really was horrified by that. Every debate now, they're bringing it up. Referendum, and it makes me sick.
And the focus I have taken as the main point of the question, and that's making sure that the facts are out there because that's what's important for you, and I think it's fundamental to your question. You'll pick up that, and then I'll come back to this question about the facts.
Right, yes, it's important to get the facts out there, and the facts are that under the present devolved settlement, the Scottish Government could abolish the bedroom tax in Argyll and Bute. Now, the reason that it could do that is because there's a system which is called discretionary housing payments. That's money the council gets in order to pay housing benefit on behalf of people in straitened circumstances. Originally, the council was to get £150,000 in discretionary housing payments. I argued for more, and the government has now given the council an extra £200,000 in discretionary housing payments. The Scottish Parliament has the powers under the Scotland Act to top that up by another 150%, and if it did that, then the council would have enough money to pay the bedroom tax on behalf of everybody in Argyll and Bute. I hope the Scottish Parliament will do that. So the facts are the Scottish Parliament could abolish the bedroom tax in Argyll and Bute, but it's important. It's important that the right decisions get made locally, because discretionary housing payment was available to councils last year and to give to tenants in straitened circumstances, and if councils didn't give the money out to tenants, then they had to hand it back to Westminster. And the SNP administration in Argyll and Bute actually handed 1/7 of the discretionary housing payment back to Westminster instead of spending it on tenants in Argyll and Bute. So the facts are that there are powers already exist locally regarding bedroom tax. Last year they weren't used, and I hope that the Scottish Parliament will use them this year.
I think we're really in danger of allowing ourselves to dance to the SNP tune and all this. They want this to be about the bedroom tax. They want this to be about Tory policies. They want this to be a battle between Scotland and England, between the SNP and the Tories. That is what they want, that's the thing. Remember this. When Scotland had 13 years of a Labour government, it overwhelmingly voted for. The SNP were campaigning for independence. When the Labour government introduced the minimum wage, the SNP were campaigning for independence. When the National Health Service was created in this country, they were campaigning for independence. When all these things happened in our country, all the socially progressive moves, the SNP were standing outside shouting about independence. They want our public meetings to be about the bedroom tax. They want it to be about the Tories. It's not. It's about the next 50 years, it's about the next 100 years, it's about the future of our country, it's about my young niece who's sitting over there, bored to tears, and well done for sitting through this so far, darling. It's about her, it's about what happens to her in the future. It's political opportunism from the Scottish National Party. They know fine well what they're doing, they're trying to change the frame of the debate. We shouldn't allow them to do it. This is about the future of our country, not about their dislike for the Tories.
The other thing I looked at Ireland quite regularly. I looked at Glasgow. The Irish have been independent since 1942. You know that, yeah. I employ Latvians in my business. They're happy working with me. I'm happy that they're working with me. Because I want people to work with me throughout Europe. People come to this country, they see the shining example.
They come here because they like the way it's put run.
Yeah, they like the way it's
They like the United Kingdom.
They like the United Kingdom, maybe, or they maybe like Scotland. Right, HS2, what's it going to do for us?
Again, this is classic. This is what it wants to do. Arguing different policies. This is the choice we face next year is a choice of two ideals. It's, do you believe that you should go alone, or do you believe that we're stronger when we work together as part of a team and we pool and share the resources? It's a choice between two ideals. That's it. Now, the policies that you're talking about, sir, with respect to you, that's Lackey, with respect to you, Lackey. These are policies that you can have out during elections. That's what elections are for. You can say you don't like these policies, so therefore we're going to vote against them. This is something different. But this isn't about HS2. This isn't about the bedroom tax or whatever it might be. This is a fundamental choice about which we want to do.
It isn't laughing. Listen, the ladies here, listen, you need to respect the electorate. This lady made a genuine plea. Show me the balance sheet. Show me how it's going to work. And your response is HS2. That's not an answer to show me the balance sheet.
Perhaps you should circulate a list of acceptable questions so that we know which ones to ask and which not to ask. That's what interested
hear that. You're going to shut it down.
This is, the point is, this is about the future of our country.
No, I understand the point you're making,
It's-
but my point is, I was quite interested to hear the answer to that question.
Okay, well,
And all it seems that you're only prepared to shut questions you don't like down. I'm interested to hear what the answer to these matters are.
right. Alan, you pick up HS.
Right, well, HS2 is needed because the West Coast main line is getting close to capacity and is estimated to get to capacity in less than 10 years' time.
And what's it going to cost us?
I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but all the economic estimates are that that the money, that the benefits to the economy will outweigh the costs, as happens with nearly every big transport project. Because if we don't build HS2, then in less than 10 years' time, the West Coast main line is going to be at capacity, and people who want to travel on it will simply, not everybody will be able to travel on it. HS2, once it's completed to Glasgow and Edinburgh, it will cut the journey time to London by, I don't know the exact number of minutes off the top of my head, but it's a significant time. I think it's in the region of an hour. It will cut the journey time to from Glasgow to London. Now, if Scotland, phase one goes from London to Birmingham. Phase two goes on to Manchester, and then phase three would then go on to Glasgow. Now, it doesn't matter which part of the line you start at, because the journey time from Glasgow to London is cut by the same amount of time, whether the fast stretch is between Glasgow and Carlisle or between London and Birmingham. Now, the important reason that this is relevant to the independence debate is that if we remain part of the United Kingdom, then when the UK government makes its calculations of whether to go ahead with a project, it works out whether it's to the benefit of the whole United Kingdom, including Scotland, and HS2 is beneficial to Scotland. So if we're part of the United Kingdom, then HS2 will, phase 3, come all the way to Glasgow and Edinburgh. But if Scotland was a separate state, then HS2 will go as far as Manchester. But when the UK government then makes the calculation, there aren't enough people in Carlisle to justify taking HS2 beyond Manchester. So if Scotland was independent, a separate state, HS2 will stop at Manchester. So that it's as far as HS2 is concerned, it's Scotland's benefit that will remain part of the UK.
Okay, so we've got an answer to that. Any further points? We'll come back to the lady's question about the economic impact.
My name is Ian Tyson. This is not about bedroom tax or any of these other issues. The question is about independence. I'll be voting no, because I support an independent Scotland. We are not going to get an independent Scotland by voting yes. I sympathise with Jamie McGregor there talking about the common agricultural policy, which has shut down many farms, dumping dead fish into the sea in Scotland, and the SNP turn up to talk about independence when really they mean direct rule by Brussels, who are imposing that. Now, under the Scottish nationalists' interpretation of independence, we would become a new state of the European Union, which means we have to accept EU rule above Scottish law. We will have to accept the euro currency as a condition of all new EU states. I'm for Scottish independence, like Norway, like Switzerland, like Iceland, but I'm backing the no, but I'm not backing better together. Now, I'm wondering if better together also means you're pro-EU, because I think the EU is very bad for Scotland and very bad for the UK, but at least in the UK they are making noises to have a vote about it, whereas Alex Salmond refuses in this so-called independent Scotland to allow the Scottish people to decide who is going to rule them. This is a referendum, and do you want to be ruled by Brussels or do you want to be ruled by Westminster? I don't particularly want to be ruled by Westminster, but I certainly don't want to be ruled by Brussels, and I wish the No campaign would be saying that. As a new EU state, Scotland would only have 1% vote because the votes are weighted by population in the EU. England would still have 10% of the vote, would be less independent, if people vote yes in this referendum. Now, I'm pro-independence, I'm voting no, and if you want people who are pro-independence to vote no, that's what you need to be talking about.
Well, it's an interesting and important argument. The whole question of the EU is one that where it would be a step in the dark if there was a yes vote in the referendum, because we don't know what the terms would be for the new Scottish state to be a member of the EU. We know that Spain, for example, which has a lot of independence movements within its own country, would be very reluctant to let an independent Scotland join. And remember, we need the agreement of every one of the 20-odd EU countries. But another interesting issue is posed by the fact that it's the policy of the Conservative Party to have a referendum of the UK leaving the EU. So it's just suppose there was a yes vote in Scotland, that would mean almost certainly the Conservatives would win the next general election in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. They would have the referendum, and if England, Wales and Northern Ireland then voted to leave the EU, where does that leave Scotland? Because if we are in the EU and England's out of the EU, that's when you do get the border posts and the passports. So it's independent. It's independence. A yes vote in the referendum. It's simply a leap in the dark. We just don't know where we're going with it.
Jamie.
Well, the gentleman there raised an interesting point about strength of voting. And one thing I wanted to bring to people's attention was that recently, with the Common Fisheries Policy, we've just had that revised. And even Cabinet Secretary Richard Lockhead of the SNP said he considered it to be not a bad deal, affected by the UK delegation. He did get very cross about not sitting in the top seat of that, but then I suppose the Welshman might have done, and the Northern Irishman might have done as well. So the fact of the matter is that between them they got a good deal. Now, they had 34 votes on the council. An independent Scotland would have had 5.
Okay. Who else spoke here? Somebody waved their hand here, wanted to speak. There's a question. Anyone else got something they want to ask, clarify? Are we exhausted with questions? Yes?
John Campbell, Blairmore. I'd like to make a brief comment and then follow it up with a question. I've lived abroad for most of my life, and I was present in the former Yugoslavia when it broke up, and also in the Caucasus. I've seen the turmoil, the social mess, and the economic difficulties, and the ultra-nationalism that independence caused in countries that have been mentioned tonight: Montenegro, Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Croatia, Georgia. I'm not insinuating that it could happen here, but that's in the back of my mind. Now, I'm definitely voting for Better Together, and if we lost that vote, I would be gone. I'd find another country to live in. But my point is, devolution max has been mentioned tonight. Have the panel any views on federalism? It works beautifully in Canada and Australia, and it's a form of devolution max, and it's not independence, and it's not maintaining the status quo, but would anyone like to field that?
Right. Well, yes, it's a solution that I would like to see for the United Kingdom. The problem is that the other 3 countries of the United Kingdom, that's not their preferred solution. And in a United Kingdom, obviously everything has to proceed only by agreement by all the countries. So I don't, although it would be my preferred solution, it's not the preferred solution of the other countries of the UK, and I think the way forward is more devolution for Scotland. There's the devolution that's already been passed by the Scotland Act that's going to come into effect in 2015, 2016. I would like to see more devolution beyond that, but I mean, we have to win this referendum first and then proceed from that to further devolution.
Mary.